My name is Alexa Koenig, and I am a research professor of law. I also lecture in the investigative reporting program in the School of Journalism. Doom scrolling is a phenomenon when people are relatively mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds, oftentimes drawn to kind of what we would consider clickbaity information that's particularly attention grabbing. And I think that can often be a problem because it's a relatively mindless way of engaging with social media content where you're not necessarily going online to find something in particular or to interact with other human beings, but you can actually lose quite a bit of time just kind of scrolling from one attention-grabbing piece of content to another. I used to work in casinos, and I know that there was so much science put into the ways that we biologically relate to different sounds and sights that will grab our attention. This is really all part of the bigger attention economy and the way that our attention has really been harnessed for income for private corporations, et cetera. So down to the science of like what sounds will elicit a positive response in the person, or what little teasing glimpses of what's coming next will get you to scroll to the next item in your feed. All of that is going to provide some kind of positive reaction biochemically in our bodies that are much like addicts, where we just want to get that hit over and over, even if it's a subtle one. And that ultimately is going to drive behavior. But I do think we're all vulnerable in different ways. And, certainly for younger generations, like Generation Z, Generation Alpha, who've really largely grown up with phones in their hands, it's such an automatic thing to have your phone. It's almost like an extension of your body at this point, that I do think a lot of the platforms are really aimed at making sure that from the beginning that generation are consumers of this information. I think as you go up the generations and you get a less intimate relationship with phones, there's a little bit more variation in terms of people's level of addiction to scrolling social media. And then I think it really gets to the individual of, are they someone who uses social media in the first place or not? And if you are a user of social media, I certainly see how the platforms are trying to keep my attention on the issues that they think that I would be most interested in, and soliciting me with particular targeted advertising that's very different than what my 17-year-old daughter is being targeted with. They're using the same tactics, just different content. I think they're much more addictive for two reasons. So I think the first part is human behavior and our growing dependence on social media as a tool for communication. The second is the companies themselves are constantly doing research to see what keeps people engaged with their platforms. So they've become increasingly sophisticated in understanding everything from human psychology and the neuroscience of human behavior to understanding culturally where there may be differences even between communities or age groups or other demographics, and are specifically targeting those various demographics to keep them engaged. A big one is notifications. So one of the first things that I did when I started looking into the research and the science behind this is turning off notifications so that companies weren't constantly bombarding me throughout the day with little teasers of, oh, hey, your good friend just posted something, click here to check on what it was. Or, other kinds of little bits of data that they were spreading. I mean, I think even if you look at the way for example, Instagram, they now prioritize along the top the stories of people that they think you're most interested in. So you'll have that person right up top and you'll have like kind of a red circle around it, drawing your attention to it. They're doing everything they can to try to figure out, how do I manipulate this person into clicking on another post, and then hopefully getting them into that loop where they just kind of don't put down their phone for a longer and longer period of time. So there's a bunch of different ways to do notifications. One is, for example, I'm looking at my computer screen right now, and along the bottom I have all my toolbar, and two of the tools there are my Signal and my WhatsApp messaging platforms. Those might get a little red number 1 or 2 if I have 2 messages waiting for me. That would be a notification. You have something cool to see. Click on this. But a push notification would be where it actually flashes up on my screen and it's pushed out to me so I can't possibly ignore it, or it's pushed to my main screen on my phone, and it's kind of in front of everything. So that would be a push notification. The really kind of dangerous feedback loop we can fall into of we're feeling increasingly awful about the world and the state of the world and the way other people who may think differently than we do think. And so we're going back to the social media platforms and ironically, maybe using them even more to try to get that dopamine hit that we get when we see like a cute puppy or we see our friends post, or we're chasing kind of a pleasure that may never come or that we may get in very small doses. Like kind of keeps driving the attention. So the more that we feel awful, the more we may be wanting to turn to our phone for relief. And I think also just being kind to yourself and knowing this is a really common phenomenon. These platforms are designed to be addictive. You are a human being and it doesn't matter who you are. Many of us are susceptible to this. So we've kind of got to work on it together and design the future that we want to see in our relationship with social media. I do think as individuals, but also culturally, thinking about what role we want them to play in our lives.